There is something powerful that happens when you invite your friends into your process of fitness or even into your process of building your faith or whatever it is. You're going to use the freedom of your thought processes and creativity, and you're going to schedule it out and tell your life what to do. You need to be surrounded by other people who can challenge you. And one of the reasons that we isolate is because we don't naturally like being challenged. Welcome to the Serve One podcast. My name is Philip. I'm a campus pastor here at Elevation Matthews, and we have been in this series on growth. I challenge you to have a growth mindset. And a lot of people, they might think that they try to grow in their life or they try and progress in their life, and that's okay. But it's something entirely different to have a growth mindset where you're actively seeking out ways to grow and you're creating systems in your life that will help you grow. That's what I want to help you do in this episode, is continue to grow in remember last week we talked about the 5 F's, faith, family, fitness, finance, and your future. Last week, we talked about growing in your faith. I need you to grow in your faith because I believe it is the foundation for everything that will happen in your life, right? So that needs to be priority number one. We looked at a rule of life. And if you look back at last week's episode, you'll see this rule of life that we posted in that. Now I've printed it off here. Of course, I've got it in my Google Documents where I can see it regularly, but this just becomes a plan for your life. You're essentially telling your life what it is going to do based off of the goals and projections and hopes and all of those types of things that you want to accomplish. You are going to designate your growth by telling your life what is going to happen. So today we're focusing on growing your family. And what I mean by this is, of course, growing your family in terms of your immediate family, whether that is your relationship with your spouse, your kids, your parents, your siblings. So growing your relationships with your family, but also within this is growing your relationships with your community. I believe that God designed us to live in community. And really, we see today that people who choose to isolate themselves, they are the individuals that have more issues with anxiety, with stress, of course, with loneliness, with a whole number of things that plagues them because they have isolated themselves and they struggle with getting around people. But something that you need to do if you're going to have a growth mindset and if you're going to press into everything that God has for you, you need to be surrounded by other people who can challenge you. And one of the reasons that we isolate is because we don't naturally like being challenged. We don't like people just coming in and telling us where we're doing it wrong. It feels as though they're attacking us. It feels as though they're telling us that we're wrong. And especially nowadays, where everything was like you get a trophy, a participation trophy for everything you do, and you get celebrated for everything that you do. I think it's one of the worst things that we can do for our children and for our friends is to celebrate absolutely everything they do without the addition of saying, hey, here's an area that you can grow as well. I think it's great to be able to go into something and say, oh man, this is what you did well. This is where you won, but also this is where you need to grow and become more of who God created you to be. So that's what we're doing in this podcast, is we're helping you grow. So as you're focusing on growing your family, that being your immediate family and the relationships that you have in your life, your community, your friendships, all of that kind of stuff, with this rule of life, you're going to write down the things that you're going to do to grow your family. So I wanted to be super practical in this episode. Remember, last week we talked about in each of those areas, the 5 F's, and I'm totally fine with whatever you want to label them. I've heard a lot of different categories that people use and say, hey, this is what I want to grow in. And some people have wheels where they determine like, oh, this is how well I'm doing in all 20 of these arenas. That's great. If that works for you, that's awesome. I just need you to do something. So with this rule of life, what we're looking at is, what do we do daily? What do we do weekly? What do we do monthly? Then quarterly or semi-annually, and what do we do annually? I'm just going to break down my relationship with my family and my friends, what that looks like for me, so that you can have a starting point for what it needs to look like for you. Remember, you are telling your life what is going to happen so that you can grow and become everything that God has created you to be. If you don't currently have a rule of life, I would challenge you and say, you probably don't have a growth mindset. What I want you to do is have a growth mindset. One of the tools you will use is this. Oh man, Philip, I don't like writing something down because I feel like it traps me in and I can't have freedom. No. You're going to use the freedom of your thought processes and creativity, and you're going to schedule it out and tell your life what to do. People that live their life haphazardly and think that they can just walk through and they have dreams and one day they'll just come to pass by randomly going through life, it never works. Nobody accomplished anything without significant amounts of discipline. That's something that we talked about early on in this growth series, is to grow your discipline. Go back, listen to that episode. So let me break this down for you. Grow your family. What I have under daily is, first of all, on a daily basis, we have family prayer. So I gather with my girls, all three of my girls, Lindsay, my wife, and then Cora and Honor, and we pray before we step out the door for the day. We also pray in the evening before going to bed. It's something that we do on a daily basis. Why? Because I want to prioritize the value of our faith for my girls, and I need unity with my wife so that we are synced up and that we are praying together. So we do this on a daily basis. We also have dinner together as a family on a daily basis. Oh man, well, what if you miss a day here or there? That's totally fine. We certainly have those days where we don't gather around the table and actually all eat together as a family. Either there's an event going on or we have friends over, or something shifts or changes. But as a norm, on a regular basis, we do dinner together. It's something that we all know we're going to come together, and anything could happen in that space. We could be yelling at the dog or laughing at the dog, whichever you typically do. We could be talking about our day. We could just be going around laughing with each other, constantly telling the girls, hey, eat your food. It doesn't matter. The value is that we get together on a daily basis and we break bread together. Something else that I have on here as a thing that I do on a daily basis, and this would fall into the category of daily or regularly, is in order for me to build relationships with other people, I have to invite them into some of the things that I value and some of the things that I do so that I have overlap. Because you might look at this and be like, oh my gosh, Philip, how do you have time to do all of those things? The truth is, if you don't learn how to overlap certain things, you're never going to have time or budget to be able to do everything that you want to accomplish. Let me say this. If you're like me, you're not going to have time to do everything that you want to do without some level of overlap. Maybe you're not as driven as I am. Maybe you're not as busy as what I am, because I like to be busy, but I also like to be in control of my life. I don't like being worn out. I don't like being burnt out. So if I'm going to build relationships with other men that I know I need to have in my life, well, I have to have some overlap. So something that I'm writing down here that maybe I have not done as well in the past, but it's something that I want to grow in and tell my life, this is what I'm going to do, is I'm going to invite friends into some of the training that I do on a regular basis. That helps me overlap some of the fitness piece that we're going to talk about next week in a little bit more detail with the friends and family piece that we're talking about this week. There is something powerful that happens when you invite your friends into your process of fitness, or even into your process of building your faith, or whatever it is, because when we're in community together and we're building those relationships, we can challenge each other and we can grow together. So I have that as a thing that I can do on a daily basis. Can I invite somebody to go out to the pool and get some laps in with me? That helps them. It helps me. Can I invite somebody to go on a bike ride with me? Can I invite somebody to go on a run with me? Can I invite somebody to go to the gym with me so that I have that natural overlap, and it helps me stay accountable and get after what I do? Now, at this point in my life, I am pretty disciplined, so I don't necessarily need the accountability to go and do the thing, but you might currently be at a space where you need accountability with somebody that is going to show up at the gym, that you're responsible to, that if it's waking up at 5:30 or 6 in the morning to get that run in, you might need to bring somebody into that with you so that you have the accountability to do it. So how are you growing in those relationships? So on a weekly basis, what I have here is an activity with the girls. I want to be doing a regular activity, a special activity. Now we're doing the daily dinner together, but is that enough for me to build robust relationships with my daughters? I don't think so. Certainly not the ones that will carry on into later in life when they're grown and married and have their own lives. Well, obviously, I'm not able to do that. So if I can do a weekly activity with the girls, and that could be going out on the Greenway and riding bikes. We were gifted during Pastor Appreciation Month, we were gifted a box that has these activities that we can do. You go in and it's a surprise. You scratch off the little thing that tells you what you're going to do for that day. There's a small budget to it. It lets you know if you're going to need to do it in the evening or morning, whatever it would be. But that's a fun thing that I can do with my girls to build those relationships. We need to constantly be investing in those relationships because they don't happen haphazardly. Just because they're my daughters does not mean that I'm always going to have a great relationship with them. I've got to work it and I have to be intentionally growing those relationships. Something else on here for me on a weekly basis is to call mom and dad. And the reason I have that on here is after having my daughters, it became more challenging to intentionally reach out to my parents and maintain that relationship. Why? Because I, on a daily basis, was using my drive to and from work to call my dad and connect and say, hey, what's going on? What's going on in your life? Oh man, you're into woodworking now. That's really cool. Well, now I've got my daughters with me all the time. I'm dropping them off in the morning and Honor comes with me. She goes into Academy here at church. And then I'm bringing her home at the end of the day. Making those phone calls is a little bit challenging when you've got a child in the back talking or screaming. So this is something I have in here that I need to intentionally find that space. I have also got a really good friend, a lifelong friend. His name is Nathan, and I want to do a great job keeping up with that relationship and just investing in this lifelong relationship that we have had, because the relationships that you have today, moving forward, you will never have the opportunity to have those types of relationships again. So Nathan, our parents were friends. And so as infants, we were friends. I was staying the night at his house when I was 18 months old. I don't know how my parents trusted somebody else to care for me in that way at 18 months, or I should say even burdened somebody else to care for an 18-month-old. And Nathan is 9 months younger than me. So he's 9 months, I'm 18 months. And we just grew up our entire lives together. I'm never going to have another opportunity to have a relationship like that. So I'm willing to fight for what I have been given because it's important to me. You will fight for what is important to you. So I just have text Nate on a weekly basis. Moving on to monthly, I've got a date night with Lindsay. For obvious reasons, I need to invest in that relationship. I do a monthly planning meeting with Lindsay. It's on the calendar. We look at the budget. I'll talk about that a little bit more in the finance category, but we have a monthly planning meeting where we sync up on all the things we have going on, make sure that she and I are keeping track with one another. It seems funny, right? For some couples to be like, oh, you have to schedule a meeting to do something like that. Yes, we live busy lives. And if you're not careful, before long, you are living two separate lives simultaneously or side by side rather than living your life together. You've got to prioritize it, put it on the calendar, make sure that you're going to do it. And I have something here on a monthly basis. I would like to hang out with the guys, whatever that looks like, getting together with my community, and also text my siblings. I'm one of 6. I've not done some of these things really well, but I'm creating a rule of life that if I want my life to grow and become what I would love to look back and say, this is the life I lived, well, these are the things that I need to do in order to accomplish that. They're going to look different for you. Quarterly, I've put on here an overnight getaway with Lindsay. Man, just the opportunity on a quarterly basis for Lindsay and I not to have the girls, to have a little bit of freedom, to go stay in a hotel somewhere and just have that sync up time between she and I. And then on an annual basis, Lindsay and I go on a vacation, just the two of us. You see, a high priority for me is my relationship with my wife. If I put it down here, it will happen in real life and we have to prioritize it. This is something that we will talk about in our monthly planning meeting to make sure that we have the budget in order to go and do the things that we want to do and grow and become who God created us to be. So we also have a getaway with the girls that we want to do on a monthly basis to create those relationships. And each year on their birthday, I want to take my daughters out on a date. It's so much fun for me to have an individual date with my daughters. Now, I can do this more frequently than just on their birthday. I can take them out individually and go do things and seize those opportunities when I can. I love to do that, but intentionally on their birthday, for my daughters to know that their dad loves them, that he wants to spend time with them, and he's going to get away, just me and Cora, or just me and Honor, and say, you are my beautiful baby girl, and I love you. Man, there's so much value in that, and I'm creating a rule of life for how I'm intentionally growing those relationships. Prioritize relationships in your life, and then write down, this is what I need to do for these relationships to be healthy and for me to experience the fullness out of those relationships that God wants me to experience. I challenge you, put this down on a rule of life and make sure that you are becoming everything God created you to be. Make sure that you're sharing this content with somebody. I love investing, and I'm looking forward to the new year because I've got a whole entire shift in what we will be doing on this podcast. I'm excited to invest. I'm excited for what God is going to do in your life. So be on the lookout for that, and we'll continue in this growth series next week.